let's get started. All right, I've got a couple of slides, everybody, and most of my material will be demos. I'm going to focus more on the insights side of SharePoint Online and really what that's been dubbed as Power BI. Just before we get started, though, just to level set a little bit, when you're talking about business intelligence, which is reporting, analytics, that whole world, there are kind of three high-level, at least for the purpose of this discussion, three high-level areas of BI, and breaking these out kind of by who produces the reporting that you see and that you consume. So if you're a non-technical person, in the red here we have this idea of corporate BI, and that's kind of the traditional way of doing things. IT is preparing everything for you, and you just go in and you run your reports, and it's nice and easy. In the blue is the advanced analytics world. Here again, this is kind of a specialized workload where you have data scientists, companies like pharmaceuticals, or technology companies like Amazon, Netflix. You know, these guys employ data scientists because they're trying to always get that competitive edge. They gather so much data and they need to crunch it, and it's volumes in data. And I'm sure you've heard the word or the buzzword big data. That's kind of where that sits in that blue circle. But for today, we're really going to focus on the orange circle, which is self-service BI. And the idea here is that these tools that Microsoft owns, like Excel, have now become so powerful and have the capability to do some really great reporting and visualization. And because they're Excel, the non-technical business user or power user can easily take advantage of all this capability. So the three circles here is just to say that Microsoft has offerings in each of the spaces. But for today's presentation, we're really focusing on this orange one, and that's tools for the end user. So as I mentioned, a lot of this is done in Excel, so it's no secret. I'm sure if any of you have spent any time in Excel, you've probably used it beyond just being a spreadsheet as kind of a data integration tool, right? You've maybe connected to something, you've dumped some data into a couple of tabs or maybe 10 or 12 tabs, and then you've done your VLOOKUPs and your various calculations, and you've produced some sort of analysis for some deliverable for work or meeting. And if you've ever gone through that work, you can kind of get, you start to realize what kind of a pain it was and why some of these tools become as popular as they have. So Excel was invented as a spreadsheet. It wasn't invented as a database, and yet people started to use it as a database. So now what Microsoft's done is really said, okay, if people are going to use it this way, let's make it better. So it's got the ability to hold a lot of data now, and it holds it really, really well. No more 65,000 row limit if you're in Excel 2003, or even million row limit if you're in Excel 2010 or 2013. That's all gone. You can basically put as much data in here as you want. Not that anybody needs to analyze gobs and gobs of data, because at that point you're just overanalyzing things, but the tool is powerful enough. And the workload that you would kind of go through, or the workflow, is first you want to obviously discover some data. You might know that, hey, there's this great report out there, but I really need to see that data a little bit differently, or I want to ask it some questions that report doesn't do. So being able to discover that data and this concept of querying for it, you'll see kind of throughout this presentation that you just basically want to search for it and be able to find the data. And so that capability is now makes it really, really easy to pull data down into Excel. Then once you're there, you start to analyze that data. You start to do various, maybe you add some calculations to it. Maybe you average certain things out, or you count up certain things, and you project out other things and do some forecasting or what if analysis. And then finally, when you're done, you might want to look at more just a grid of data. You might want to look at it visually, and so there's tools inside of Excel now called Power View and Power Map that enable you to view data and visualize it in ways that you haven't been able to before. And there's obviously valuable insights that can be discovered when you're looking at, like I said, more than just a grid of data. Once you're done with all that Excel work, the nice thing is that can be done by just a handful of people that really love being in Excel. Then they can publish it out to Office 365, and from there, anybody with a web browser can take advantage of all those tools, and through that interface, you can see what people have published in Excel. You can interact with those reports, and you have these sites and templates that enable you to see things where people can feature reports. They can feature commonly asked questions and answers. It just really makes the whole experience a lot more simple to digest. Behind the scenes, if there are IT people in the organization or in the audience, you have control. You can still steward that data, and you can see and manage what is being run and how often, and if there are things that are really taking off, you've got the ability to keep an eye on it. So it's not a kind of a Wild West environment where once you enable this functionality for your end users, they're off and running and you never know what they're doing. Obviously, if we've got data up in the cloud or reports and analysis up in the cloud, the actual raw data, that transactional system, that general ledger, that billing system, whatever it is probably on premise or maybe even somewhere else in the cloud, and it's got to be able to connect to Office 365. So there is that capability has been taken care of, and it does exist. As I keep saying, search is very prominent and important, and probably the easiest way to find things is to just search for them. So no more browsing through folders and sites and where did I put this or where did so-and-so stash this. Let's just search for it, and there it is. Obviously, we don't do all of our work at our workstations anymore. We're on the road a lot, or we're just away from our desks in the meeting, and we want to be able to pull this material up. And so mobile access is really important. On the technical side, HTML5 is kind of the standard where you can write mobile applications, and they basically run well on all the various devices that are out there, whether they're iPhones or iPads or Android or Windows. And then last but not least, and we'll show a demo of this, I talked a lot about people putting analysis together and reports together. Well, the technology has gotten so powerful now that we really don't even need to put the reports together. We can actually generate reports by simply typing into a search box and having the machine, the cloud, generate the reports for us. It's very exciting and powerful technology. I'll show you that at the end. I'm going to switch over to Excel now. So that's the end of my slides. Here we are in Excel, and if you've ever opened Excel and created a pivot table in Excel, you've seen this interface. It's been around for years. However, what the difference is between what I'm showing you here and what's traditionally been available is that we've got a concept of a data model behind it. And this has enabled me as an analyst or a power user to pull a bunch of data into Excel. But yet the interface to anybody else that may want to take advantage of this is the same as it's always been. So the idea here is that the interface is familiar and it doesn't require a whole lot of new training. All right, so we've created this pivot table. The nice thing about the data model that I just mentioned that's back here is that it enables us to do more with this data. So if I wanted to, for example, enhance what we've got here, and let's say, I actually put into this model, and let me just back up for a second. This model is when we're doing these demos, it's best to kind of connect with the audience as much as possible. And with BI, especially, an industry-relevant demonstration works a lot better than a generic, canned kind of mass-produced demo. I've got a simple law firm. My law firm has 3 offices. I've got data for 3 years in this model. And it's basically adding up. We're doing corporate law, so we've got practices around bankruptcy and litigation and real estate and tax work, and we're basically adding up everybody's timesheets, and that's the amount of revenue that you see on the screen here. But one of the things that wasn't natively in this data set that came out of that billing system was a count of how many matters we've had, or calculation on the average rate. And so I was able to add that, and the way I was able to add that was simply go up to this calculated fields button that's now available and just create a new calculated field. So it's on the billing table, so we'll select that. And the calculated field, let's call this AVG rate. And the idea here is I'm going to start typing, and IntelliSense pops up just like it always has for Excel functions. So average, and in this case I want to average on a particular column name. And this is where this starts to really shine through. When you've done these kind of calculations with native Excel in the past, with the VLOOKUPs and the various methods of aggregating cells, it was always, you didn't have this sort of IntelliSense where I can name a column, something like rate, and be able to aggregate that and have the IntelliSense pop up. And the other risk that you endured going the old way is that if anybody ever moved that cell, or if you accidentally bumped it and your Excel formula was calculating across the range of cells, then the formula would obviously break. And that's a little bit harder to do now because things are named the way they are. So there's my average rate calculation that we just created on the fly, and it was only a couple of clicks, and I had the IntelliSense to guide me along. So that works really, really well and really, really easy. As you can see here, I can flip through these slicers. They all reflect my calculation that I just created. AVG rate is included. And as I click through the various years and months that I have available to me, that all updates. Another thing is these slicers that I'm clicking on here. So these are kind of a new, as of Excel 2010, a new type of filter. Old filters were like this. You come over here, you drop a box down, and you make a set box with through selection. These new slicers are very visual. They're also cascading in the sense that if you look at the work month and you see them, we're scrolled all the way to the top and it starts with 2011. If I click 2013 for the year, you'll see that the work months that show up at the top are 2013. And then if I scroll further in this list, the other ones, 2011 and 2012, are still here, but they're grayed out and they're in the background because it doesn't make any sense to select a year of 2013 and a month in one of the other years. So the interface makes it really easy to do that, not make mistakes. And it's very visual, so you don't have to click and open a drop-down filter to see what you selected. So that's pivot tables and just an enhancement of what was available for, again, kind of sourcing everything from that data model that either IT created for me or a power user or maybe my colleague that knows Excel better than I did it for me. The next section I want to show you is a technology called Power View. And so I flipped over here to this dashboard tab that I created. And the idea here would be that this is kind of a revenue analysis. And it's that same data model, same data that we've used. Again, over here on the right, you have that field list that you've always had in Excel. Except Power View enables you to create these charts that when I click on something like 2011 in this pie chart, the blue area, all the other charts update automatically and they reflect. And so what we're seeing over here in this bar chart on the top right is revenue by office. And down here right below it is revenue by practice. And so again, if I click, let's say 2012, the red area, you see how those animate and now showing the revenue by practice, deeper blue. Over here that I'm hovering over is our bankruptcy practice revenue for the year that I selected, which is 2012. So the tooltip is showing us highlighted is for 5.4 million. And the total of everything was, for this practice, was the 9.6 million in the pop-up. I can do this with any of these charts. I want to just see main office revenue compared to everything else. I click on main office. If I want to see things by practice, I can do that as well. And the nice thing about when you're doing visualizations like this, you wouldn't have spotted things as easily by looking at a grid again. So if we look at this line chart at the bottom here, it's basically our revenue across the years. And we can see that our bankruptcy work kind of went up and then went back down. Our corporate work kind of continues to trend higher. That's a good positive sign. Litigation went down, but starting to stabilize. Real estate still kind of trending down. And tax went up and stabilized, maybe notched a little bit lower. So really, I can very quickly tell that our corporate practice is doing really well. They're very healthy. They're continuing to grow, and their average rates are growing as well. Just to show you how easy it is to produce a chart like this, because you're thinking, wow, it's very fancy, it's very animated, it's taking a long time to produce. I'm going to go over here to the Insert tab. I'm going to click on Insert Power View Report, which is in the middle here. It's going to create another blank tab for me. Over here on the right is my field list, as I mentioned before. In my billing table is that revenue that we want to report on. It's going to drag it over here into the white space. In addition to that, let's say we want to see this by year like we had it in that pie chart, so I'll drag that on top there. I have to tell this not to summarize, because it was summing the year number. There we go, and now we have it in a grid by revenue by year. And then, we didn't want to look at this as a grid. We want to look at it as a pie. So I just go up here to the ribbon, click Other Chart, select Pie. It turns it right into a pie, and that's very easy. We can repeat the whole process. Again, I can drag revenue into white space. This time, let's maybe look at our revenue by the office. So there it is again, broken out by office. And again, we don't want to look at this as a grid, so let's turn it into a bar chart this time. And then if I'm maybe not wanting to start from scratch, I can actually copy and paste. So I'm going to click in this revenue by office chart, and I didn't have to name it. It did that for me. I'm going to copy and paste, created a duplicate of it. And then now instead of doing things by office, let's do things by, say, practice area. So we'll find the practice field, we'll drag that into there, and there it is by practice. So basically that chart that we had, it's all wired up. I start clicking through it, it's already animating. I didn't have to do anything to do that. So a few clicks, less than maybe a minute if I would have rushed, and I've got the chart that we were looking at, that dashboard that we were looking at before. So essentially making it very easy to train people on how to do this, very easy to obviously take advantage of looking at this data in a whole different way. And then again, through familiar tools. The next capability that I want to show you, going back to the pivot table here a little bit, is a geospatial or a mapping chart for visualization capability. So I'm going to go up to the Insert tab, and in the middle here next to the Power Views is the maps. So I'm going to launch a technology called Power Map. This is all still launching within Excel, even though different windows are popping up. Once this opens, it kind of defaults to looking at the U.S. I'm going to hide this left panel just to make things a little bit bigger. Over on the right, though, first thing that this is looking at for us to do is, if you look at the down towards the bottom, is just tell it or choose a geography. And so I know, because I created this data model, I pulled all this data in here, that our client table has states and zip codes and addresses. So that's a good geographical bit of information. So why don't we check off state? If you look at the map of the U.S., it just popped a little dot into each state where we have clients. And what it's doing there is it's putting that dot in the middle of that state, so it's not too precise. I want to go a little bit more precise. I'm going to actually click on zip code instead. And now you see it refreshed, and all of a sudden the dots are a little bit more geographically located to where the client actually is. Since we have a little bit more detail in the zip code, I'm going to just keep that selection, and I'm going to hit next down here. The next thing to select is, what do we want to measure? So what this gives you the ability to do in the type selection first is show something, and when you show something like revenue, perhaps, we'll pick, you can render it by, let's say, columns. So in this case, columns will, and their height will adjust depending on the amount of revenue for that particular zip code. Or I can do bubbles, heat maps, or regions. So let's keep columns selected. The next field says height. So how do we want to control the height? And let's go ahead and just keep going with the revenue theme. And now you can see that the chart animated, and the columns got taller based on revenue. And if we just kind of change the perspective here a little bit, we look at this map of the U.S., we see that whatever's going on in the Northwest is a lot taller than the rest of our client base, except for maybe, Miami, but it's just one little tower instead of a bunch. So, if we paid any attention to the data that I was showing in the pivot table, we would have picked up that our main office, which actually is in New York City on the East Coast, was our biggest office. We had smaller offices on the West Coast and down in Miami. Those were the 3 offices. But what this is showing us here is that despite, maybe a concentration of clients scattered throughout the East Coast, serviced by those 2 offices, the majority of our revenue, it looks like, is actually coming from the West Coast. So that's kind of an interesting visualization. I'm going to change the type of visualization over to a heat map real quick, just to show you something different. Now, what you're seeing is the fainter and bluer areas are less revenue, and the deeper red areas, like in the Northwest, are more revenue. And then down here at the very bottom of the right-hand panel is something called time. And what we can add here is anything that measures time. And lucky for me, I've got years, months, quarters, and even days. So I'm going to go ahead and put days down here. And what this is going to do is animate this over the time that I've got for the data set that I've had. So I showed you before I had 2011, 2012, and some 2013 data. And now if I hit play here, we're going to see that how our revenue basically was generated over that 3-year period. And I'll do that again, and what we'll notice is, like, here at the end, we see that there's some specks of of activity in California, but if we play this again, nothing was going on in California until about, we'll say, midway through 2012, which if I'm running the business, I probably know that maybe we opened the office there, we gained another client or two. But it's a nice way to visualize how this revenue has grown over time, and how California went from nothing up until the middle of 2012, and then became kind of a very dense, red shaded bit of our revenue. So again, ways to visualize your data that you wouldn't have gotten by simply staring at that pivot table that we started with at the beginning. So let's say that I'm happy with what I've done here. I've probably done as much as I can, and maybe I want to share this with other people. So I would then save this Excel file, and I could publish it out to, or save it out to SharePoint. And I can do that one of two ways. I can go to Save As and select SharePoint here, or I'll open up my my SharePoint. This is now me in Internet Explorer, so I'm in my web browser out of Excel now. And I could simply upload it here to this Power BI site by simply going to this Documents area and just doing Upload File. So any way you want to send it up, you can. It's all very easy. I'm not going to redo these steps because it takes only a few seconds, but it's not something we need to watch. And more so that I've already got the demo workbook already up here, so we'll be able to keep going forward. With the demo workbook, it's called Tallan Law. When I uploaded it into this folder, I was able to do a couple of things. I could add it to the featured reports list, which I'll show you is at the top of the other screen. And I could add it to that Q&A feature that we talked about in the slide deck where, I said, forget about building reports. You can just simply ask questions and the reports get built on the fly. I can also schedule data refreshes, do other things here that you guys can explore on your own by simply just grabbing a trial of Power BI and getting your hands dirty, if you will. Let me click on this real quick just to show you. So I clicked on that file here in SharePoint. I'm still in my web browser, and now it's opening up that Excel web app that we talked about earlier. It's going to open up to that dashboard because I've asked it to open first to the dashboard. It's a better looking sort of first screen to see. And here in the browser, just like we were in Excel, I can click on these things, and they're just as animated and present me that same view of the data that we saw in Excel. And so the idea here is that not everybody needs to have the Excel, acumen or the desire to play around in Excel. Once you basically complete your analysis and you want to share it with other people, they can interface with it through their web browser or on a tablet device as well, through the web browser on tablet. So very portable. I'll click this tab down here over to the pivot. The pivot is the same one like we saw in Excel. So, I could expand or contract the plus sign. I could interface with the slicers, and the data does update. The slicers also cascade. Right now it's 2013. The months are showing are 2013. At 2012, the months that are showing are 2012. Oh, I got two filters going at once. Cancel that. There we go. There's 2012. And so the same sort of interactivity and fidelity that you had available to you inside of Excel. The last thing that I want to show you is that Q&A capability that we ended our slide deck with. So I'm going to go over here, click this button, search with Q&A. The idea here is that we no longer need to write reports, and after a while, as we start searching and typing, we no longer need to search and type. We can save some of these queries, and this is a sample data set that came with Power BI about gold medals in Olympics. But these pictures and these boxes that you see on the screen can be replaced by queries that you and I generate. We can add them here, and then other people can just simply click that icon and go right to that data. But just to show you, so you remember our data model here is about our fictitious, 3-office law firm that does corporate law across 5 or 6 practices. We had that billing revenue that we were looking at, and I'm simply typing that into the box, and bam, it's already calculated that, across all the data that I had about $70 million of revenue, and my average rate was $415. Let me just keep typing, because if I wanted to see that by practice type, it's simply going to generate a bar chart for me and show that broken down by each practice type. And I can hover over this bar chart just like we were able to do in Excel and see that that's actually 15.8 for real estate, and the 15.8 for litigation, and then those are other practices, so forth and so on. Maybe you want to see this by year, so for practice type in 2011. The numbers update, so they're a little bit smaller now. 50 million for real estate, 5.9 for litigation. If I delete 11 and put 2012, numbers change again, and the chart is updating. Now you might be saying, well, Adam, you're saying I didn't have to build this chart, but I know you built this chart in that Power view that you created. So just to show you, I did not build anything that looked like this. So let's put revenue, comma, average rate on the chart. And what this has done on the fly is generated the scatter plot, which we did not see anywhere in my Excel workbook. And what this is doing is plotting two measures, revenue and average average rate on the chart. Average rate is over here on the left-hand side. The millions of revenue are going down the bottom, and our practices are these dots that appear. And what a scatter plot allows you to do is very quickly see, in the upper right is going to be the highest average rate and the most amount of revenue. So that's our litigation cost. These guys are just really doing really well. And I can hover over these and see more details about what's going on. Another thing an attorney or law firm might do is by staff member. Maybe you want to see the top billers report. And so here we go. Pamela is by far, she's probably a partner at the firm because she's bringing in all kinds of revenue, billing her clients. And there's a quick billing, top billers report, basically, that Power Pivot and Power BI generated for me on the fly. So pretty amazing stuff. It was just actually released to the public less than a month ago, so fairly hot off the press technology. But certainly a great way to see how the world and these technologies are being leveraged. Technologies like search engines, everybody's are used to now being applied to the BI world, and able to generate things like this and put it at everybody's fingertips is, I think, very, very promising, very powerful technology.